The Right Thing by R. Stegner. Executive Officer Captain Kane Albright had always tried to do the right thing. When his father fell ill, he took sabbatical from his astromantic studies to manage the household. When the first men died to the Tellus savages, Kane had heeded the call to arms and joined House Ashton to fight for humanity. In every problem he had faced, he'd seen a clear path, a duty, but now Kane was having a difficult time knowing just what the right thing was. Sir, our outpost in Tumblestar has been destroyed. Kane sat at a field desk in Colonel Moretti's tent, watching the tense shoulders of his commanding officer as he surveyed their forces. Moretti was a boulder of a man, dusted with snow of white hair. When he set a course, there was little that anyone could do to sway him, and Colonel Moretti was determined to reinforce the Federation's troops at Castle Reeve. Damn Tellus, the colonel growled. At least we ground them out of Dolmar and Celis Pass. Formation willing, we'll crush them between our forces at Reeve and the Regalis Nakani. Actually, sir, scouts report a Nakani priest at Tumblestar. It may have been friendly fire. Moretti turned his granite eyes on the captain, a scowl etched into his face. Nonsense. The priest fight for the Federation, Albright. I won't tolerate a defamation of the church. Kane reddened and shuffled through the other surveillance dispatches. A few mentioned similar skirmishes at the other Federation outposts, but some reported the destruction of Tellus assets, as the colonel mentioned. They all described a priest attacking with Nakani construct. Captain, Moretti barked, cutting through Kane's thoughts. Am I understood? Kane snapped to attention. Yes, sir. Dismissed. The colonel turned again, looking out the open tent flap over the camp. Albright gathered his things with efficient familiarity and squeezed past his commanding officer into the camp. It didn't make any sense. Why would the Regalis Nakani attack their own? Kane had seen his share of misinformation. The Federation had been at war for nearly a year, but could all of these reports be wrong? They came from different scouts and multiple areas. It didn't make sense that, hey, you can't come in here. Kane looked up to see a young woman, held back by the camp guard. Dressed in midnight robes, she looked almost like a priest, but for the color of her missing vestment. This is a military encampment. Refugees are being taken to Silverdale. You'll have to go around. I'm not a refugee, the woman insisted, trying once more to walk around the guards. I must speak with your commanding officer. Again, the guards headed her off. Look like a refugee to me, one said. The other put a hand on his pistol. I'm afraid we must insist. Before things could spiral, Kane hastened over. What's going on over here? The men snapped to attention. Commanding officer. This refugee was asking to speak with the colonel. The woman's jaw clenched, probably biting back protest. Instead, she looked to Kane and said, I'm here on a matter of dire importance. Please hear what I have to say. Kane wasn't sure if it was what she said or the way she said it. Maybe it was the way her dark hair clung to the sweat of her brow, or the dirt caking on her face, or the way that she was dressed. Regardless, he knew he needed to listen to her. At ease, soldiers, he ordered. Then, to the woman, come with me. Immediately the lines on her face lightened, though the soldiers remained hung, as she brushed past them and followed Kane to his tent. He set his files down on his locker and gestured to the chair as he sat down on his cot. I'm an Executive Officer Captain Kane Albright. And you are? Acolyte Ethlor. Former Acolyte. Ethlor's lips tugged downward. Have you heard of the Aggregate Order? It's a small sect of the Regalis Nakani that believes all life must be bound to order before humanity can achieve its inheritance from formation. Kane pursed his lips, fingers tugging on his beard as he often did when he thought. I'm not much for church, so you'll have to forgive me. How is that different than anything else the Nakani teach? Aggregationists believe that it is our responsibility to subjugate the other races in order to accomplish order, by death or any means necessary. Okay, but what does that have to do with House Ashton and our army? Up until a few months ago, Ethlor said, I was a member of this sect, a disciple of Nakani Ocean, the priest who founded and leads the Aggregationists. Ocean announced the time was nigh to initiate our crusade. He claimed that the formation had spoken to him of Tellus artifacts that would allow him to exert control over all living things through their cryalis. He called it the Tier of Athel. But the Aggregate Order is not so large, as I said, so Ocean found a way to override and steal Girmis from other Regalis Nakani. After we pilfered 4, Ocean said it was time to march on the Tellus commune. There was an uneasiness brewing in Kane's gut, the same feeling he'd gotten when he'd first read the reports. And though he knew the answer, he forced the words out anyway. But you didn't just attack the Tellus, did you? Ethlor's cheeks paled. Her dark eyes glossed over as she relived war horrors. Kane had seen only ink on a page. No, Ethlor whispered. At first it was just the Tellus, but we didn't find the Tier. Then, One of the Karoth we interrogated let slip that the artifact might be in a Federation town that had been built atop an old Karoth shrine, and so we marched to Gildenol, just outside town. Here, Ethlor's voice faded. Her hands shook in her lap, so she clasped them together until her knuckles turned white. Kane dug out a flask and handed it to her. She tipped it up, grimacing at the rough liquor, but didn't hand it back. On a hill outside of town, Ocean preached a sermon expounding on Formation's order. Humanity is to inherit the Formation's power, but the devout are meant to preside over the irreligious. He riled us up and ordered that we advance, and we slaughtered every man, woman, and child in Gildenol. All that blood, and the artifact wasn't even there. Horror and dismay filled the tent like cold water and ink, mingling together and replacing the light in it. Kane reached for the flask and took a drink himself. It was true. A priest was attacking their own people, killing them for Tellus artifacts. And if Ocean would commit such crimes to obtain the tear, what might he do once he had it? Come with me, Kane said. He snatched the reports back up and stalked out of his tent and up the hill. Ethlor hurried after, falling into step beside him. Do you know where Ocean might be headed next? Kane asked. Well, if he continues south, I'd guess Pikewallow. That's where we're going. Without pausing for protocol, Captain Albright pushed into the colonel's tent. Moretti sat behind his field desk now, a plate of roast chicken and vegetables in front of him. He hesitated, fork to mouth, when he saw Kane. What's the meaning of this, Captain? Why is there a civilian in my tent? He pointed to Ethlor with a carrot still on its tines. Sir, the surveillance reports are true. There is a priest attacking Federation towns. This is Ethlor. She confirmed it. It's true, Ethlor said. His name is Ocean. I was part of the contingent before he started attacking his own people. Moretti ate the carrot off his fork, then another. Gears turned in his eyes, face stone and stoic. At last the colonel took a draw from his glass and wiped his mouth. We have our orders. We marched to reinforce the main force at Castle Reef. Sir, please, Kane started, but Moretti forestalled him with raising a finger. But, if you want to risk your own neck on this, I grant you leave to take your old unit. Not a man more. Hear me, Albright, and if nothing comes to this, there will be consequences. 24 hours later, Ethlor found herself fortifying Pikewallow with a company of 100 soldiers. The sun tipped low in the sky, dipping their hastily constructed barricades in golden shadow. Ethlor approached the chapel the alderman had unlocked for them earlier, and inside, an altar lay at the far end, flanked by an impressive rank of leaded windows. Hardly defensible, but they were encouraging the townsfolk to seek shelter elsewhere. Not that most of them were listening. You really think the artifact could be here? Kane asked Ethlor, voice echoing off the chapel's vaulted ceiling. If the tear of Athel is in Pikewallow, it will be here. The early Nakani had a thing about building on Kareth holy sites. Ethlor tried to keep the doubt out of her voice, tried to evaluate where the relic might be hidden, but there was a part of her that believed the tear didn't exist. That Ocean had gone mad, she sighed. Even if that were true, Ocean would still be on his way here and innocent lives would still very much be in danger. Her hands were already covered in blood. She couldn't coat them in more. See if you can find a cellar, she told Kane. I'll check the altar. Kane departed into a side chamber while Ethlor mounted the stairs onto the platform. The altar was little more than a slab of stone with some basic scroll work. Ethlor circled back and was about to give an explorative shove when Kane's muffled voice called to her from the other room. Ethlor, you might want to see this. Weaving quickly through the families praying for protection, she found a cramped study with an open hatch in the floor. She climbed down to find Kane in a dusty basement. He had shoved a rack of jars and cobwebs out of the way and was shining a light crystal on the wall. There, etched in bas relief, was a fading mural. Most of the facade was crumbled with age, but the center depicted a weeping visage, hand extended towards a gathering of horned men and women. Kane's eyes glinted in the light of the crystal. I think we found it. But before Ethlor could process, a door slammed above. Captain! Captain! Albright scrambled for the ladder. Ethlor followed. In the chapel, a breathless scout saluted them. They're here. 3 Skirmish and 300 men just past the Dunham farm. Kane snapped into command mode. All semblance of the eager treasure hunter gone. Send a squad of astromancers to ambush them at the outskirts of the city. Focus fire on the Skirmish. I want them out of the fight before they set foot anywhere near this church. The soldier saluted and was gone. You mentioned Ocean overrode those constructs, Kane said, addressing her. Do you think you could turn them to our side? I don't know. Ethlor had been with Ocean when they'd stolen the first Skirmish, but she was only an acolyte. She hadn't yet learned the secrets of the full Nakani priesthood. If I had the opportunity, I could try. I think Ocean programmed them to respond to his followers, so I might be able to take control. Then we'll make sure you get the opportunity. Kane pushed past the Pikewallow residents, flooding into the church and out into the street. All around, soldiers were dragging last-minute barriers into place and bracing for the blood. Nearby, colors and light flared as an astromancer prepared his. Then the first sign of battle struck. A blast of sound and a plume of flame rising over the rooftops. Gunfire exploded. Screams. And as quickly as they came, the sounds of fighting fled. A cold sweat of silence stole over the company. Ethlor flexed her cog gauntlet hand, wishing she'd taken her scythe when she'd left. Kane handed her a pistol. The clank of construct footfalls slowly forced through the crust of quiet. Ethlor didn't know which side shot first, but struggle started again in earnest. All the rage and panic and animus rushed to fill the void, rolling over everything in its path. A Gearmus turned the corner, missing its Gatling gun. Still, slag poured over its lava blaster, melting flesh and metal alike. An astromancer discharged a wildfire rune directly into the machine's chest, shattering its cryalis. The Gearmus dropped directly on top of the man, smashing him to paste and shaking the ground. An explosion sounded somewhere behind them. Then, another constellation flash turned the road to ice and sent the assaulting force sliding for cover until magma cannons could clear a path. Ethlor put a bullet in an attacking priest while Kane directed a roaring wind to clear gun smoke and steam. "Do you see Ocean?" he shouted over the noise. Ethlor scanned the broken thoroughfare, her chest seized. "No." Kane craned his neck to look himself. Dropping down, he closed his eyes for a moment, lips moving as he talked through something. Then, his eyes snapped open as he cursed. Pushing to his feet, he ran to the chapel shouting, "All astromancers on me!" Ethlor sprinted after, firing from her gauntlet as she went. They slammed into cover next to the open doors with a single additional astromancer. When had the doors reopened? Civilians scrambled over the bodies of the dead. Daring a glance within, Ethlor saw Ocean, flanked by the third Gearmus, and surrounded by beams of blue and green light. It was her turn to swear. Kane grabbed her shoulder, pulling her back. "What is he doing?" he asked. "Binding spell. He uses it like a locator for the tier. The spell won't work if the artifact isn't in range." "Well, is it working?" His grip dug into her shoulder. "Well, I've never seen those colors before." Kane swore again, this time turning to the astromancer. Immediately the woman responded, "I'm the only one left, sir. What do you need me to do?" "We need to stop that priest from finishing his spell, but we can't do that with a Gearmus in our face. I need you to make an opening." Kane looked Ethlor in the eye, "And I need you to turn it to our side." "Aye, sir." The astromancer formed up by the door. Checking that Ethlor was ready, she charged into the room. One step later, her body hit the floor, felled by a hail of bullets. Ethlor stuttered to a halt, barely stopping herself from meeting the same fate. She looked to Kane, panic plain on her face. They could not allow Ocean this relic, but they were out of men and out of time. "Same plan," Kane said, swapping the crystal into his diffuser. "On 3. Ethlor pushed him out in front of her. Using that momentum, Kane flared a cryalis shield around them. Gatling bullets pinged off, burying themselves in the stone, walls, and floor. He cut left, leaping off a mound of rubble and drawing the Gearmus's fire. Time slowed to a crawl, muzzle fire bloomed, and Kane hung in the air amongst his astromantic projection. It took Ethlor a moment to recognize it was magic, not adrenaline, causing the delay. The barest shimmer of dilation marked the edge of a bubble encircling Kane. The Gearmus, and the very edge, Ocean. Without wasting more time, Ethlor skirted the perimeter of the spell. Careful to keep her body and cryalis out of the area, she reached for the construct. Viscous air, like pushing through oil, parted until Ethlor's fingers connected with the Gearmus crystal. A breath later, Kane's spell ended. Lead blazed into his chest. His body struck the ground. Ocean's incantation completed. Power burned in the priest's body. A cord of light drew the terror of Athel out of the rubble. Similar strands webbed to Ocean and each body on the floor, and they shifted, glowed. Kane rolled over, rose to his feet. All around the dead did the same, eyes burning with green light from the artifact. Ocean's eyes shone too, as he smirked down at Ethlor. "You should never have left, my child. You have worked against me, but I have won." "Have you?" Ethlor asked. The Gearmus, newly under her control, raised its gun and sprayed Ocean with bullets. The light snuffed from his eyes and the artifact and all the corpses. They dropped like puppets of a temperamental child, and the tear of Athol clanged down with them. It bounced off stone debris, rolling to Ethlor's feet. Outside, the cries of pain and battle continued. At her instruction, the Gearmus turned to rejoin the fight, but alone it wouldn't be enough to wipe out Ocean's remaining disciple. Ethlor didn't know if it was the right thing to use the relic and the dead, but she knew she couldn't let Ocean's ideology outlive him, so she began to cast a binding. Friends, this is an absolutely terrific story. I thoroughly enjoy it. We have a nice, clear, linear plot. It's very driven by intrigue, and we see people really struggling to understand why there would be such treachery in their own midst. One of my favorite scenes is actually when they're in Kane's tent having the discussion, and she's basically expositioning hey, here's this sect of the Regalis that is super messed up, and he's like, I don't know anything about church, just turn it into English for me. And she was able to do that. There's just something about that where, yeah, they're on the same team, much like me and the greater friend circle that I have, we would be on the same team, right? I'm with them, I support them, and there's a built-in bond there. But I don't actually know all the ins and outs of a different belief systems and stuff like that. So sometimes it's hard to work together, and in that kind of mystery of not fully understanding someone's motivations, it can be exceptionally hard to grasp, oh, they're turning on us. What is this guy doing? And of course, the artifact, the Tear of Athel, is such a cool concept as far as, being able to reanimate and kind of reinvigorate corpses. And in this case, Ocean didn't get to use it a whole lot, but the idea of, absolute power corrupts absolutely. The thing rolls to Athlor's feet and she has to make a choice. She chooses to use the artifact to save the people, but man, that is a slippery slope. And again, when it's all said and done, no matter how good morally she is, when the reports leave this town, she's going to be the only priest walking away. Or priestess, rather, walking away, and so she will look like public enemy number one, especially with an army of undead next to her. It's not a good PR look, but it's these kinds of stories where we're putting, generally good people into very complex situations where morality gets a little fuzzy. And so when I think about why, two armies from the same faction would fight each other, this is a perfect example of that inner tension and the complexity of motivations. Ends justify the means in both the broad scale of the main story arc is Ocean getting a hold of this artifact, but also in the micro of our main character now has to make tough decisions. An absolutely fantastic story. This came in second place during the first ever Legacy of Atmos lore competition. And I gotta say, it was a contentious pick because, it was just this and the number one, which I did yesterday, are just, oh my gosh, they're so terrific. All the stories were unique and just wonderful, but these two set themselves apart and made it very difficult to choose a winner. So anyway, thank you so much to R. Stegner for writing this in. I super appreciate it. You did a standout job. And I hope you stick around, buddy. Thank you all so much for watching and listening, and I'll catch you in the next Legacy of Atmos lore video. Happy wargaming.